It happened when I rushed to the operating room, seized by panic upon hearing that my husband was in critical condition. Suddenly, a nurse grabbed me. "Hide and trust me," she whispered. I obeyed and concealed myself in an adjoining room. 10 minutes later, the door opened, and what I saw froze my blood. If you are watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and let me know where you heard my revenge story from in the comments. I would love to know how far it goes. My name is Mariana Herrera, and I have lived most of my adult life in Guadalajara, in a quiet neighborhood in Providencia, where the street lamps glow warm at night, and the traffic from Lopez Mateos never truly sleeps. Anyone who met me years ago would have described me as a devoted wife, the kind of Mexican woman who believed that love meant sacrifice, that a marriage survived because the wife held it together with patience, silence, and endurance. And for a long time, I thought that was enough. I thought that if I gave my whole self, my time, my peace, my dreams, then my husband, Ricardo Torres, would always come home to me, would always remember who stood behind him through every promotion, every stress-filled project, every long night at a construction site in Zapopan or Monterrey. I believed loyalty guaranteed safety. I believed love protected you. I learned on one single night how wrong I was. It happened on a night when the rain felt heavier than usual, the kind of downpour that makes the entire city look swallowed in shadow. I still remember the way each drop hit the living room window like tiny warnings I was too naive to understand. Ricardo had been at a site all day, and by late evening, he still hadn't returned. Normally, he would at least send a short message. "Running late, cariño. Don't wait up." But that night, my phone stayed silent, completely silent. I picked it up, set it down, picked it up again, feeling that strange pressure in my chest that only grows when something inside you already knows the truth but refuses to name it. I called him once. It rang, but he didn't answer. I called 2 more times, and they went straight to voicemail. I tried to convince myself he was busy, or that the storm had drained his battery, but the fear would not let go of me. Part of it, I know now, came from the argument we had earlier that afternoon. It wasn't even a real fight, just a comment I made, a small plea that maybe he should slow down on all those sudden expenses that kept coming. Dinners with colleagues he never named, gadgets he bought but never used, trips he took for work that never came with receipts or dates that matched his schedule. Ricardo snapped, telling me I didn't understand the pressure on his shoulders. I swallowed my hurt as I always did. I never wanted our home to be a battlefield, so I let him leave angry while I stayed behind in the quiet kitchen, washing dishes with hands that trembled more than I would admit. When he walked out the door, something inside me felt as if it cracked, but I ignored it because that is what women like me were taught to do. Patch the cracks before they spread. By the time the clock neared 12:30, the streets outside were glossy with rain, and my heart felt trapped in a fist. Then the house phone rang, the landline, the one nobody used. The sound sliced through the silence so sharply, I dropped the remote from my hand. When I answered, my voice was almost a whisper. "Hello?" A man spoke on the other end, his tone flat, professional, too calm for what he was about to say. Am I speaking with Mrs. Mariana Herrera, wife of Mr. Ricardo Torres? Yes, yes, that's me. What happened? Is he all right? Ma'am, I need you to remain calm, he said, and my knees weakened instantly because no one says that unless something terrible has already happened. Your husband has been in a serious accident on the Autopista Mexico-Guadalajara. An ambulance just brought him to the Hospital General de Guadalajara. His condition is critical. They are taking him into emergency surgery as we speak. I felt the receiver slide in my hand. The word critical echoed through my head like it had been carved into bone. Critical. Surgery, I repeated, barely able to breathe. The director of the hospital, Dr. Esteban Villaseñor, is overseeing the procedure. You should come immediately. Dr. Villaseñor? Ricardo trusted him completely. I had met him before. Calm, unreadable, the kind of man who looked at you as if nothing surprised him anymore. I told the caller I was on my way, though I barely remember hanging up. My legs wouldn't move at first. Then something like adrenaline or terror surged through me. I threw on a coat over the clothes I was wearing, grabbed my keys with shaking hands, and ran to the car. The rain hit me in cold sheets the moment I stepped outside, but I didn't care. I drove through Guadalajara like a woman possessed, barely seeing the road through the blend of storm water and my own tears. I remember praying, not with words, but with raw desperation. God, please don't take him from me. Please, give me one more moment to fix things. I didn't stop at the lights. I didn't care about traffic. I only cared about reaching him before it was too late. When the hospital finally appeared in front of me, glowing white against the black sky, I rushed inside without even closing the car door properly. A nurse at the front desk checked her computer and told me they had taken Ricardo to the 4th floor. Operating room 3. I ran up the stairs, down the hall, heart pounding so wildly I felt dizzy. The long, sterile corridor was lit by harsh fluorescent lights, and, at the far end, I saw the double steel doors. A red sign above them glowed, En Truquia. My husband was behind that door. My whole life was behind that door. I lifted my hand to push it open, but before my fingers touched the cold metal, a strong hand grabbed my arm and yanked me back. I gasped and turned. A young nurse stood there, her face pale beneath the soft blue scrubs, her badge reading Camila Andrade. Her eyes were wide, terrified. Not the fear of someone facing a medical emergency, but the fear of someone who knew a secret far darker. She whispered urgently, "You're his wife, right? The wife of Ricardo Torres?" I nodded, breathless. "Yes, I need to see him, please." "No," she cut in, gripping my arm harder. "You can't go in there. And more importantly, they must not know you're here." My heart stopped. "What? Why?" Her voice cracked with urgency. "Because that is not a surgery, Senora. It's a trap." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The nurse's words sliced through my panic with a coldness I had never felt before. And in the bright, sterile hallway of the 4th floor, everything around me seemed to blur, as if the world were bending at the edges. I stared at her, at those trembling hands still gripping my wrist, and whispered, What do you mean by a trap? My husband is in there. They told me it was critical. Camila looked over her shoulder as if she expected someone to appear at any second. Her breath quick and uneven, and when her eyes came back to mine, there was a kind of desperation I recognized too well. The kind a woman shows only when she has witnessed something so terrible she can't unsee it. Señora, listen to me, she murmured, lowering her voice to the faintest thread. You cannot be in this hallway. If they find out you're here before I can explain, you won't have a chance. Please, you have to hide. Then she tugged my arm, pulling me down the hall toward a storage room, half hidden behind an old vending machine. My feet resisted at first, my mind fighting her words, because a part of me still clung to the belief that hospitals were safe places, that doctors were protectors, that the emergency I had been told about was real. But Camilla kept pulling, whispering fiercely, "If you stay out here, you will die. Please, trust me. For your own life, trust me." Something in her voice, something raw and trembling, finally shattered the last piece of denial inside me. She pushed open the dark wooden door, hurried me inside, and whispered, "Lock it. Don't make a sound. No matter what you hear, don't come out. I'll return when it's safe." Before I could ask anything else, she closed the door, and I heard the soft click of the lock sliding into place from the outside. I stood alone in near total darkness, breathing so fast it felt like my lungs were collapsing. My knees gave out, and I slid down the door, the cold tile pressing through my clothes. Only a thin line of light slipped in from beneath the door, barely enough to make out the metal lockers in front of me, and the faint smell of disinfectant mixed with old coffee. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Every thought inside my head screamed in different directions. Why was she helping me? Why would anyone want to hurt me? And where was Ricardo? Was he even inside that operating room? My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I curled into myself, arms wrapped around my knees, trying not to make a single sound. The silence in that room was suffocating. I felt like a prisoner trapped in the dark while something monstrous moved just outside. Minutes crawled by like hours. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. No voices, no footsteps, just the distant hum of machines somewhere far down the hall. I checked my phone. 1 a.m. Time felt stuck, like the hallway outside had been swallowed by a void. My thoughts spun into every terrifying possibility, and I kept wondering whether I had just made the worst mistake of my life by trusting a stranger. Maybe Camila was unstable. Maybe Ricardo truly was fighting for his life, and I was wasting precious moments locked away in a closet. The guilt pressed in from all sides, and with it came memories. Memories of every sacrifice I had made for a man I thought would protect me. I remembered the nights I stayed awake ironing his shirts for the next day because he said looking sharp mattered in his industry. I remembered sending money to support his mother's medicine when he said times were tight. I remembered driving between Guadalajara and Zapopan to bring him meals when he worked late. Even when I was exhausted from my own job, I remembered forgiving him every time he came home distant, distracted, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. I remembered being patient, loyal, believing that marriages had storms and that women were meant to hold steady through them. I remembered putting myself second so many times that eventually I forgot what it felt like to be first in anyone's life. And now I sat on a dirty storage room floor, hiding from people who wanted me dead. The thought made me choke on my breath. 7 minutes passed, then 8, then 10. Suddenly, I heard the faintest click, not at my door, but somewhere in the hallway. My entire body stiffened. I pressed my face to the gap between the door and the frame, searching for even the smallest glimpse. Through a narrow slit, I saw something. The red Entrujilla light above operating room 3 had turned off. The surgery had ended. My blood iced over. A slow hiss sounded, the steel doors of the operating room opening. My lungs froze as a shadow moved into view. At first, it was just a silhouette, tall and composed. Then the figure stepped into the fluorescent light, and I saw his face. Dr. Esteban Villaseñor. He wasn't panting or sweating or carrying the fatigue of a man who had just battled to save a life. He looked calm, too calm, and then he peeled off his gloves. Gloves streaked with a red I knew in an instant was not blood that belonged to any emergency tonight. I covered my mouth to muffle a cry. Another figure stepped out. I expected a patient on a gurney, a team of nurses, but it wasn't that. It was Ricardo, my Ricardo, standing, walking, healthy, wearing surgical scrubs like he was part of the team instead of the victim of a fatal accident. He rolled his neck, stretched his arms casually, as if he had simply been sitting too long. There wasn't a bruise on him, not one. The breath left my lungs. I bit my hand hard to keep from screaming. Then a third figure emerged. A woman, tall and elegant, her long hair falling over a dress far too glamorous for a hospital. Veronica Alvarez, Ricardo's assistant, the one who always treated me like I didn't belong at my own husband's company dinners, the one he always defended, the one he always said I was overreacting about. She handed him a bottle of water with a smirk, and my husband, my partner, the man I had given my youth and my loyalty to, laughed, and then I heard his voice, clear and confident and cruel in a way I had never heard before. The plan worked perfectly, he said. And in that moment, in that tiny, dark room, something inside me shattered so loudly, I was sure everyone in the hallway could hear it. I stayed frozen behind that door, my breath shallow and trembling, as the hallway outside filled with the sound of their voices. Ricardo's low and smooth, Veronica's sharp and mocking, and the calm, calculated tone of Dr. Villaseñor. It was like listening to strangers wearing the faces of people I thought I knew. Ricardo took a long sip of water, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and said with a relaxed confidence that made my stomach twist, "I told you it would be easy. She believes everything I say. Mariana always has." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. I pressed my forehead to the cold metal of the locker beside me, trying to steady the shaking inside my bones. Veronica laughed, a soft, venomous sound, and replied, "Of course she does. Women like her always believe. They cling to their husbands like a lifeline. They never imagine that the man they love could play them like a cheap violin." Ricardo's voice came next, dismissive, almost bored, as if discussing a problem at work instead of his own wife's fate. "She'll arrive crying, maybe shaking. She'll fall right into the story. You did great with the ambulance call, Doc. Real, professional." I felt my heart drop to my stomach. The phone call, the ambulance, the accident, all of it, fabricated, designed, scripted. I had run through a storm, believing my husband was dying, not knowing I was being guided straight into my own death. My nails dug into my skin as I tried to stay silent. The doctor's voice came through next, deep and controlled. "Everything is in place. The hospital records show severe internal bleeding. The surgery logs are set. For now, she'll think we saved him. Later, we present the complication: a blood clot near the liver. A second operation is required. High risk. Anesthesia issues. It will look tragic, but natural." My throat tightened so violently I almost choked. Then Ricardo's voice, my husband's voice, answered with a soft chuckle that used to make my heart melt, but tonight sliced through me like a blade. Tragic for her, maybe. Convenient for us. Us. Him. His lover. The doctor. A triangle built on betrayal. A trinity of executioners is planning my death, with all the emotion of people ordering dinner. Veronica's heels clicked lightly on the tile, and I could picture her tilting her head, that smug smile I always sensed, but never fully understood. "Mariana will sign anything you ask her to. She's that kind of woman, loyal to the point of stupidity." The pain those words caused was indescribable. I had sacrificed so much for Ricardo, years of my life, friendships, opportunities, quiet hopes I never spoke aloud. I put him first, even when it meant putting myself last. I trusted him, even when it hurt. I stayed, even when I should have left. And now, those sacrifices were the very things they used as weapons against me. They walked farther down the hall, their voices growing louder, more confident. Ricardo said, "Tomorrow morning, we will do the second surgery. If she dies on that table, the insurance pays out millions. We are going to Switzerland, a fresh start." Switzerland, a fresh start. Without me, on the money he planned to collect from my death. My hands instinctively moved to my chest, feeling the weight of every year I gave him. Every night I waited for him to come home, every meal I cooked, every moment I forgave. I gave everything and received betrayal so deliberate it felt inhuman. And then, amid the rising storm of my thoughts, a memory struck me with sudden clarity. 3 weeks ago, Ricardo came home with a stack of documents, saying it was part of an investment package, a new life insurance policy with my name, my signature, my foolish, unsuspecting signature. I remembered my hesitation, how I told him the premiums were too expensive, how I asked why I was the one insured instead of him, when his job was the dangerous one. He laughed it off, kissed my forehead, and told me not to worry. And I believed him. Dear God, I believed him. The conversation echoing outside confirmed everything Dr. Villaseñor said. Once she signs the consent form, everything will appear legitimate. Even if she panics, her emotional state will work in our favor. Her being overwhelmed will look like fear for her husband, not fear for herself. I felt something inside me shift, something sharp, cold, and unlike anything I had felt before. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't confusion. It was a quiet rage, deep and steady, a storm forming beneath the surface of my skin. I pressed closer to the tiny gap in the door, just enough to see their silhouettes turn the corner as they walked toward the elevator that led to the recovery rooms. Their footsteps faded slowly, leaving the hallway silent again. In that silence, I finally understood the truth. I wasn't here to save Ricardo. I was here to be killed by him. My own husband, the man I had devoted my life to, had orchestrated everything. My panic, my terror, my desperate rush to the hospital. He had counted on my love to blind me. He had expected me to walk willingly toward my own death. I sat back on the cold floor, hands pulling at my hair, the weight of it all pressing on me until I felt like I might break apart. But I didn't break, not yet. Instead, I whispered through gritted teeth, "Why? Why, Ricardo?" And in the darkness of that cramped room, I answered my own question. Because he knew I loved him. Because he knew I wouldn't suspect him. Because he believed I would die quietly. But he was wrong. A soft click suddenly sounded at the doorknob. My body froze. Someone was unlocking it from the outside. For one terrifying second, I thought it was Ricardo, or Dr. Villaseñor, or Veronica. My breath caught as the door cracked open, letting in a beam of white light. A small silhouette slipped inside quickly. "Señora Mariana." It was Camilla. Relief nearly knocked me over. She closed the door behind her and locked it again from the inside, her chest rising and falling fast. "Did you see them?" she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak as tears finally spilt down my face. "I heard everything," I managed. "Everything." She knelt beside me, gripping my hands tightly. "Then we don't have much time. If you want to live, you're going to have to fight." The doctor's voice poured through the phone like warm syrup, thick and sticky with false compassion. And though I knew every word he spoke was a lie, I forced myself to gasp softly, letting a trembling breath break into the speaker, as if I were hanging on by a thread. "We did everything we could, Señora," he continued, the practiced cadence of a man who had delivered these lines many times before. Except, usually, his deceit ended with a body on a table and a signature on a form. "Your husband is stable for the moment, but it was a close call, much closer than I had anticipated." I clung to Camilla's sleeve, grounding myself, reminding myself that the fear I was performing had to feel real enough to fool a man who had mastered the art of reading panic. "Dios, Ricardo," I whispered, letting the tears come because they weren't hard to summon. They flowed easily now, not from love, but from grief for the woman I had been. The fool who would have believed every word this man was saying. Can I see him?" I stammered. "Por favor." Of course, he replied smoothly. He's in the recovery room downstairs. I'll meet you in the waiting area outside. And, Senora, he paused, applying just the right amount of solemnity to the moment. We need to discuss something urgent, something we discovered during the operation. I felt Camilla tense beside me, and I realized this was the moment she had warned me about. The manufactured complication, the deadly necessity of a second surgery. What? What is it? I asked, my voice breaking the way a wife's might when bracing for more bad news about the man she loves. We found a dangerous clot near his liver, he said gravely. We managed to stop the bleeding for now, but it's temporary. He'll need another procedure in the morning. High risk. Very high risk. I squeezed my eyes shut, letting a sob slip free, but somewhere beneath the surface, something cold and sharp steadied me. Morning, I repeated. I understand. You're a strong woman, Senora, he said, dripping honey into every word. Ricardo is lucky to have you. The irony nearly made me choke. Come down whenever you're ready and take your time. I know this is overwhelming. He ended the call with a soft click that felt like a trap snapping shut. For a long moment, I just held the phone, staring at the black screen glowing with my reflection, eyes puffy, face streaked with tears. But behind the fear, there was something else now. Something I didn't recognize at first. A spark. The faintest, fiercest shape of resolve. You did well, Camilla breathed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. He believed you. I wiped my face, smearing tears across my cheeks, but didn't bother cleaning them fully. They would serve me well. So what now? Camila glanced at the door, as if expecting footsteps at any second. Now I'll trigger the alarm. It'll go off on the 6th floor. That will give you a small window, not long, maybe 2-3 minutes before someone reroutes the system and resets the panels. When it goes off, you head straight for the basement. Stay low in the stairwell, so no cameras catch your face. She handed me the key card she'd stolen earlier. The plastic felt flimsy in my hand, too small to hold the weight of my survival. This opens every restricted door except the pharmacy and the lab. Dr. Villaseñor's office is in the far left corridor. The server room is across from it. You'll recognize the machine, a large black tower with blinking green lights. Just plug the USB into the front port and wait until the light stops flashing. My stomach twisted. How long will that take? 30 seconds, she said. Maybe 40, but it will feel much longer. You can't let go of the fact that if someone shows up, you run. You don't explain. You don't confront. You run. I nodded, though every part of me trembled. Then Camilla took my face in both hands, her thumb brushing away a stray tear. Senora, listen to me. You have survived years of things you never said out loud. Years of putting others first. You can survive this, too. I swallowed hard as a painful truth rose in my chest. She was right. I had lived through 1,000 small deaths long before this night. The loneliness of being ignored in my own home. The exhaustion of carrying a marriage alone. The humiliation of suspecting betrayal, but being too scared to confront it. The ache of realizing the love I poured into Ricardo had become a resource he consumed without ever giving back. This was only the moment all those sacrifices revealed their cost. Thank you, I whispered, and I meant it with every part of me. She nodded once, then slipped toward the door like a shadow about to vanish. When the alarm sounds, that's your signal. Don't hesitate. The moment she stepped into the hallway, I felt the world tilt again. The click of the lock echoed through the tiny room like a countdown beginning. I crouched low, pressed my ear to the crack beneath the door, and waited. My pulse pounded so hard it felt like it shook the floor. Then, the faintest distant beeping, a soft mechanical whine. And finally, a shrill, piercing alarm began to wail through the hospital, its echo bouncing off the walls like a warning call from the universe itself. This was it. My window, my chance, my life. I burst through the door, keeping my head down, heart hammering against my ribs as I moved quickly toward the stairwell, the red lights flashing above every exit. Nurses ran in the opposite direction, shouting instructions, pushing carts, scrambling to move patients to safer floors. No one paid attention to me. I slipped into the stairwell, letting the heavy door slam shut behind me, and I ran downward, my footsteps echoing in tight spirals. With every step, I repeated the words that had carried me through years of hardship, but now took on an entirely new meaning. You can survive this. You can survive this. You can survive this. When I reached the basement landing, I paused just long enough to catch my breath, then swiped Camilla's card. The lock clicked. The door opened. A cold draft brushed my face as I stepped inside. The air below smelled cleaner, colder, as if the walls themselves were holding secrets. I tightened my grip on the USB in my hand, and as the door closed behind me with a soft, final thud, I realized there was no turning back. I was walking into the wolf's den, and for the first time, I wasn't walking in as prey, but as a woman who finally understood she had something worth fighting for: her own life. The basement hallway stretched in front of me like something carved straight out of a nightmare, long and sterile, lit by cold fluorescent bulbs that flickered just enough to make my pulse jump each time the shadows shifted. I closed the door behind me softly, my trembling fingers still wrapped around the stolen USB drive, as if it were the last fragile barrier between me and the death my husband had planned. The moment the latch clicked, a strange silence wrapped around me, thick, heavy, unnatural. Up above, the fire alarm continued wailing, the entire hospital shaking with urgency and chaos. But down here, the sound was muted, distant, as if I had stepped into another world entirely. I forced myself to breathe slowly, quietly, counting each inhale the way I used to count coins back when Ricardo and I struggled to make ends meet, when I believed sacrifices meant partnership and not exploitation. I tightened the coat around me and moved quickly, keeping close to the wall, my shoes barely making a sound on the polished floor. The basement was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that seeped into my bones and reminded me that danger wasn't just an idea. It was alive down here, watching, waiting for a misstep. As I approached the first corridor, I saw a sign: Office Suites, Dr. E. Villaseñor. My stomach twisted, but I pushed forward, stepping into the narrow hallway, lined with frosted glass doors and dark nameplates. His office was the last one at the end. Of course it was. Tucked away, isolated, positioned like a spider's web, waiting for the next victim to stumble in unsuspectingly. For a moment, I hesitated outside the door, staring at his name engraved neatly into the metal plate, and wondered how many families had been destroyed behind this door. How many women like me had believed his gentle voice while he hid the blood on his hands. I swiped the key card. The lock clicked. I stepped inside. The room was immaculate, almost unnervingly so. Dark wooden shelves lined the walls, filled with books arranged by height. The desk was polished to a mirror shine, with a single lamp casting a warm pool of golden light on its surface. But even with that warmth, the air felt cold, empty, as if the office itself knew its purpose wasn't healing, but hunting. I closed the door behind me and went straight to the large desk, pulling at the drawers with trembling hands. The first was filled with neatly stacked folders, hospital forms, and a leather-bound notebook filled with scrawled notes in Villaseñor's sharp handwriting. The second drawer held supplies: syringes, sealed vials, surgical gloves, all pristine and untouched. But the third drawer, locked, made my heart pound. I dug through the desk until I found a small silver key hidden beneath a stack of papers. My hands shook as I fitted it into the lock. When it clicked open, the breath caught in my throat. Inside, there were only 2 files. Just 2. One labeled Ricardo Torres, the other Mariana Herrera. Seeing my name on that folder made something inside me collapse and rise at the same time. Collapse from fear, rise from rage. I opened Ricardo's file first, a full medical exam taken 2 days ago. Perfect health, no injuries, no fractures, no impact trauma. Blood work, normal. CT scan, clear. Heart, strong. The doctor's signature, his real signature, confirmed everything Camila had told me. Ricardo wasn't the victim. He wasn't the patient. He was the orchestrator. I felt my breath tremble as I opened the second folder. Mine. At first glance, it was a copy of the life insurance policy I remembered signing at our kitchen counter. Only now in this office, Isharai. Under this light, I see the details clearly. Beneficiary, Ricardo Torres. Advisor, Dr. Esteban Villaseñor. Coverage, 7.8 million pesos. Then I saw something worse. A consent form with my forged signature, authorizing additional emergency interventions as deemed necessary by the attending surgeon. My hands went cold. I touched the paper as gently as if it might burn me. They had already prepared everything. They planned not just to kill me, but to bury the truth beneath a mountain of paperwork that made it all look legitimate. My mind raced. Through the years I spent supporting Ricardo, the times I canceled my own needs to prioritize his, the moments I accepted excuses that never made sense because I wanted to believe my marriage was still something worth saving. I thought of every dinner that went untouched, every quiet night alone, every apology I gave to keep the peace while he drifted farther away. I whispered, "How could you do this to me?" But the room swallowed the words. I shoved both folders into my coat, zipped it shut, and moved toward the door. Security footage. That was the last piece. The proof that would tear apart their story. The server room was across the hall, behind a steel door with a blinking keypad. I swiped Camilla's card again. The light turned green. Inside, the room buzzed with the hum of machines. Tall, black server towers, blinking with green and blue lights. Cables snaking across the walls like veins in a living organism. I found the main system easily, its lights pulsing steadily. My hands were slick with sweat as I knelt and inserted the USB into the front port. A red indicator light flashed, then blinked, then blinked faster. 30 seconds. It felt like 30 years. Every sound in the hallway made my heart leap into my throat. I kept glancing over my shoulder, waiting, truly waiting, for the door to swing open and for Ricardo or Villaseñor to walk in, their expressions twisting into the realization that I was not the obedient, naive woman they counted on. The red light flickered, slowed, turned green. The data was copied. I pulled the USB free, tucked it into my bra beneath my coat, the only place they wouldn't think to check, and rose to my feet. A sudden sound echoed in the hallway. A voice. Deep. Familiar. Ricardo. "Are you sure she's still upstairs?" he asked. My blood froze solid. If he came this way, if he opened this door, it was over. I pressed my back against the server towers, forcing myself to breathe silently, praying he would turn away. His footsteps grew louder, then paused. "Let's check the basement just in case," he said. I shut my eyes. This was it. I was caught. Until suddenly, the fire alarm reset with a jarring clank, and a burst of voices erupted upstairs. Ricardo cursed softly and turned. "Fine, we'll go up. She shouldn't be wandering around alone." His footsteps faded. The hallway fell silent once more. My body felt weak with relief, but I didn't have the luxury of resting. I slipped out of the server room, shutting the door as quietly as a breath, and headed toward the emergency stairwell. I had the evidence. I had the truth. Now all I needed was time. Time to get out of this place alive. As I reached the stairwell door, I placed a hand on the cold metal, whispered a quiet prayer, and pushed it open, stepping into the shadows where the next chapter of my fight for survival waited. The stairwell swallowed me in darkness as soon as the door shut behind me, and for several seconds, I had to grip the railing just to stay upright, fighting the wave of dizziness that hit me now that the tension of the basement had broken. I had the evidence. I had both files pressed against my chest inside my coat, and the USB drive hidden against my skin like a secret heartbeat. But the danger wasn't over. It had only shifted shape. If Ricardo or the doctor realized I wasn't where I was supposed to be, everything would collapse in seconds. I forced myself to breathe quietly, moving up the steps one at a time, sticking close to the wall so the stairwell's dim emergency lights wouldn't catch my face. My legs ached, trembling with adrenaline, but I kept climbing, hearing faint voices echo through the cement walls, none of them familiar enough yet to make me panic. When I finally reached the second-floor landing, I stopped and pressed my ear to the door. The hallway outside sounded calm, calmer than it should have been given the chaos upstairs. Maybe the alarm distraction had done enough. Maybe I had slipped through the cracks of their plan. But cracks don't last long, especially not when your enemies are hunting you inside a building they know intimately. I peeked through the narrow rectangular window in the door. Empty hall. Fluorescent lights are humming. A rolling cart is parked against a wall. No footsteps. No shadows. I slipped out quietly, keeping my head down, letting my hair fall forward to hide my face from any passing camera. My heart was pounding so hard, it made my ears ring. But I walked quickly, refusing to run. Running would draw attention. Running would tell the world I had something to hide. I approached the elevator bank at the end of the hall, but stopped cold when a voice drifted from around the corner. Ricardo. He sounded irritated, impatient, the way he often sounded with me when I asked too many questions or expressed a need he didn't want to meet. If she's already here, he was saying, she'll be headed to the 4th floor. She always panics, always goes straight to where she thinks I am. His words, spoken so casually, so dismissively, struck a chord deep inside me. The echo of years I spent letting him believe that about me, letting him shape my identity into something fragile so he could feel strong. I backed up quietly and slipped into the nearest supply room, closing the door with a softness that made my hands feel almost weightless. I leaned against the wall, breathing through the ache in my chest. He was looking for me, not out of love, not out of concern, but out of strategy. He needed me to arrive in the waiting room as the grieving, devoted wife, the role he expected me to play until I signed away my right to live. And I had played that role for so long that he believed I still would. I wasn't sure whether that realization made me feel stronger or more shattered. A soft tap at the supply room door snapped me out of my thoughts, and for a moment, my entire body froze. Then a whisper slipped through the crack near the floor. Señora Mariana, it's me. Camila. I opened the door a few inches, and she slipped inside quickly, pushing the door shut with her back before facing me with wide, frantic eyes. Her chest rose and fell fast, and she locked the door with shaking fingers. Dios mío, she whispered. I thought they had already found you. Security is everywhere. They're searching the lower floors. He was just here, I breathed. I heard his voice. Hurt flickered through her face, a kind of protective anger I didn't expect from someone who had known me only a few hours. We have to move fast, she said, before they reset the cameras, before they check the basement feed. I got the files, I said quietly, pulling the zipped edge of my coat open just enough for her to see the 2 folders. And the server data. Her breath caught. Thank God, she whispered. That's enough. That's enough to show the authorities everything. The fraud, the fake surgery, the conspiracy. But her expression shifted, the reality sinking in. The problem is getting out. She wasn't wrong. Every instinct told me that this hospital, the one place I thought would save Ricardo's life, was now the place designed to take mine. What's the safest exit? I asked. She shook her head slowly. Right now? None. But the emergency door by the loading dock might be your best chance. It leads to the side parking lot, but we have to go down again, back toward the basement. My blood ran cold. Another descent. Another risk. Another chance to cross paths with the people who wanted me dead. But I nodded. Survival isn't always about choosing the safe option. Sometimes it's only about choosing the possible one. Camilla cracked the door open and scanned the hallway. Still empty. She motioned for me to follow. We stepped out quietly, and I kept my head low as we moved, each footfall balanced between urgency and silence. When we reached the stairwell again, she whispered, "Down 2 levels." Then left. We descended quickly, the metal railing icy against my palm. My heart felt like it was swinging inside my chest. Unpredictable, wild, but my mind was clearer than it had been at any other point tonight. Maybe fear sharpens you. Maybe betrayal carves a path through the fog. Or maybe I had simply reached the point where survival no longer felt optional. It felt like my final act of self-respect. When we reached the sub-basement landing, Camilla listened at the door before opening it just enough to slip through. The hallway here was darker, less maintained, cables running along the ceiling like veins. I stepped out behind her, but before she could lead the way, the sound of 2 men's voices drifted from around the corner. We both froze. One of the voices was unmistakably Ricardo's. "We'll check every corridor," he said sharply. "She must be on this floor or the one above. She wouldn't leave the hospital. She wouldn't leave me." Something deep inside me twisted painfully. The bitter realization that even now, even with murder on his mind, he still spoke about me like a possession instead of a partner. Camila grabbed my wrist and pulled me into a dark alcove behind a stack of folded gurneys. We crouched low, barely daring to breathe, as Ricardo and another man's footsteps approached. My body shook so violently, I had to clamp a hand over my mouth. They were so close, I could smell his cologne, the same one I used to breathe in when he hugged me from behind in the kitchen, the same one I once found comforting. Now it filled me with nausea. He walked past without stopping, but his tone was sharp enough to cut. "Find her. Before she finds anything else, she shouldn't." The footsteps faded. Camilla exhaled shakily. I closed my eyes. Something inside me hardened. I wasn't the woman he knew anymore. And I wasn't done fighting. Not yet. Camilla held her breath beside me, her hand gripping my wrist so tightly I could feel the pulse hammering through her fingertips. And for several seconds, we both stayed frozen in the narrow darkness behind the stack of folded gurneys, waiting for Ricardo's footsteps to fade completely into the labyrinth of the sub-basement. Even after the echo dissolved into silence, my heart still beat so violently in my chest, it felt like it might betray us just by existing too loudly. I lowered my hand from my mouth slowly, feeling the tremor that refused to leave my bones, and whispered, "He's close. Too close." Camilla nodded with wide, fearful eyes, then leaned in inches from my ear. "They won't give up. Not tonight. We have to move before they double back." The cold concrete beneath us seemed to vibrate with the weight of what she was saying. I inhaled as quietly as I could, letting the stale metallic air burn the inside of my lungs as reality settled over me. The man hunting me wasn't a stranger. wasn't a thief or a random murderer. It was the same man I cooked dinner for, the same man I stroked to sleep when he was stressed, the same man I held when he said the world was too heavy. And now he stalked the hospital halls with the calm cruelty of someone taking out the trash. I swallowed back the bitterness rising inside me and nodded for Camilla to lead the way. She stepped out first, scanning the corridor again, before pulling me forward. We moved quickly, leaning close to the wall, our silhouettes melting into the shadowed corners of the sub-basement. The air felt colder here, like something lived in the ductwork, watching. We walked until the corridor split, one path disappearing into dark storage rooms, the other illuminated faintly by a flickering red exit sign. Camilla pointed toward the storage side. The loading dock is at the very end. 2 more corridors, 1 turn, and a service ramp. And after that? I whispered. A side parking lot, she answered. If we can get out, I'll take you straight to the police. Her voice faltered at the end, as if even she questioned whether the authorities would believe us or whether Villaseñor had buried his influence too deeply into the hospital's walls. We moved again, shoes silent, breath shallow, steps measured. I tried to focus only on the path ahead, but the weight of the evidence inside my coat reminded me with every movement that I was carrying truth dangerous enough to end men's careers and their lives if they were ever held accountable. The sub-basement twisted unexpectedly, like a maze designed to confuse intruders. Twice, we had to backtrack when we reached dead ends filled with broken equipment or old hospital beds. Each time we turned around, each time we stepped into a new hall, I felt the panic crawling closer, as if Ricardo's presence lingered just behind us, breathing down our necks. At one point, Camilla froze so abruptly that I nearly collided with her back. She lifted a hand, warning me not to move, and I held my breath as she carefully peeked around the corner. Then she jerked back so fast her shoulder hit mine. "He's there," she mouthed without sound. My blood surged to my ears. She pressed herself against the wall and motioned for me to do the same. I leaned in, heart pounding, and dared to look. At the far end of the hallway, near a stack of crates, Ricardo stood with one of the security guards, the one who had yelled at me earlier when I parked in the emergency zone. The guard looked uneasy, but Ricardo's stance was calm, almost practiced. "She didn't leave through the main entrances," Ricardo said, his voice cold, controlled. "She'll still be in the building. She's too emotional to think clearly." The guard rubbed the back of his neck. "Sir, maybe she just stepped out for air. You know how families get during emergencies." Ricardo's reply made my stomach turn. "My wife doesn't go anywhere without telling me. She doesn't make independent decisions, trust me. She's still here." The words struck me harder than the betrayal itself. That was what he truly thought of me. A woman incapable of thinking on her own, incapable of choosing anything without his approval, incapable of leaving him even when her life depended on it. In that moment, I realized I didn't just want to survive. I wanted him to know exactly who I had become. Camilla tugged me backwards gently, and we retreated silently, moving down another dark hall as Ricardo's footsteps went in the opposite direction. Once we turned a corner, I exhaled shakily, the pain in my chest sharp but clarifying. "He really believes I'd never leave him," I whispered. Camilla looked at me with something like pity and strength mixed together. Men like him build their power on the assumption that the women they choose will never realize they're stronger than the chains put around them. We kept moving. The air grew colder. The walls narrowed. I saw a door ahead, a thick metal one with a faded sign reading Service Access, Authorized Only. Camilla hurried forward, swiped the card, and the lock clicked. Hope cracked through the fear like the first sliver of sunrise. But just as she pushed the door open, voices echoed behind us again. Closer, sharper, angrier than before. I didn't have to hear more than a single word to know who it was. Ricardo. "Check the service exits," he barked. "Now!" Camila's eyes flew wide as she grabbed my arm and pulled me through the door, letting it shut behind us with a soft, metallic thud. "Run," she whispered. The service hallway was long and sloped downward, the floor lined with black skid marks from years of deliveries. At the far end, I could see the faint outline of the loading dock doors. Each step felt like wading through mud, my legs heavy with exhaustion and terror. Behind us, a door slammed. Then, another. Ricardo was coming down the same hallway, boots hitting the floor in a rhythm carved out of control and fury. Camila pushed me harder. "Go, Senora, go!" We reached the bottom of the ramp just as the loading dock doors groaned with the vibration of nearby movement. Camila darted toward the control switch to open the external gate, but before she could press it, a sharp metallic click echoed behind us. My heart plummeted. Ricardo's voice filled the corridor like a poisonous fog. "Mariana." Just my name, spoken not with love, not with concern, but with possession and anger that I had dared to escape a role he wrote for me. I turned slowly, every instinct screaming, every memory stabbing me at once. There he stood, framed by the dim red emergency lights, his expression twisted not with worry, but with insult. I was insulted that I had outsmarted him, an insult that I had disobeyed. He took one step forward, and the cold smile on his lips told me everything I needed to know. He had no intention of letting me reach that door alive. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, like a man scolding a child. "You're ruining everything." And in that moment, shaking, breathless, cornered, I stopped being afraid of him. I was afraid for my life, yes, but not of him, because I finally understood. He didn't know me anymore. He didn't know my strength. He didn't know what I had already taken from him. The truth, and truth, once held, becomes a weapon. Ricardo stepped toward me with the steady, confident stride of a man who had rehearsed this moment in his mind long before tonight, his shadow stretching across the floor like the dark extension of his intent. And for a brief second, the world shrank to nothing but the cold air between us and the knowledge that the man I once trusted more than anyone would kill me here without a flicker of hesitation. He tilted his head slightly, as if confused by my presence, as though I were a piece of furniture that had shifted unexpectedly. "Mariana," he said again, softer this time, that old honeyed tone slipping back into his voice like instinct. "Mi amor." Everything you saw tonight is complicated. You shouldn't jump to conclusions." The absurdity of that sentence almost pulled a laugh out of me. A broken, hysterical laugh I had to swallow down because the situation was far too deadly for madness. I stared at him, unable to reconcile the man in front of me with the man I had once held in my arms, the man whose dreams I had supported, the man I had defended against my own family when they warned me he was drifting too far, too often. The betrayal burned, but the clarity burned hotter. "Stay back," I finally managed, my voice shakier than I wanted, but louder than I expected. His eyes narrowed just slightly, the charm slipping. "You shouldn't talk to me like that," he murmured. "Not tonight." "Not tonight?" I repeated, incredulous. "You planned to kill me tonight." His mouth twitched in irritation, not guilt, not even surprise. And in that tiny movement, I saw every moment I had overlooked, every red flag I excused, every shade of cruelty I wrote off as stress. He lowered his voice. "We can fix this. You're scared, exhausted. You don't understand what's happening." Something inside me cracked, and this time it wasn't pain. It was rage, thick and rising. I reached into my coat and tapped the folder inside, my eyes locked on his. "I understand perfectly." The shift in his expression was immediate, the flicker of panic, quickly masked by anger, then smoothed back into cold calculation. "Give me that," he said, taking another step. "It's hospital property." "No," I said, my voice steady now, surprising even myself. "This is my life you tried to erase, my signature you forged, my death you planned." Ricardo's jaw tightened, and he took one more step before Camilla suddenly moved between us, her arms spread out as if she could physically stop him. "Don't come closer," she said. And for the first time, her voice carried real authority, trembling not from fear, but from determination. Ricardo's gaze snapped to her, and I saw something dark flash in his eyes. "You," he said sharply. "I should have known. You've been snooping. You think you can play hero?" Camila didn't flinch. "If you take another step, I'll scream," she warned. "And you know how fast security responds to female distress calls." He scoffed, but he stopped moving, glancing briefly up the hall as if calculating whether her threat held weight. The air felt suspended. A moment stretched, razor thin, between fate and choice. Then he looked back at me, really looked. And for the first time all night, I saw a crack in his confidence, a tiny fracture in the perfect mask he had worn for years. "Mariana," he said quietly, dangerously, "you need to understand something. Without me, you have nothing. Without me, your life collapses. You think you can run out those doors and be safe? You can't. You never could." The words hit me like a slap, not because they were true, but because I had believed them once, for years. I straightened my shoulders, lifting my chin in a way I hadn't in a long time, and answered him with a steadiness that didn't feel borrowed or fragile anymore. "I survived without love for years. I can survive without you, too." His expression twisted into something ugly, something unmasked, and he lunged forward. Instinct took over. Camilla grabbed a metal tray from a nearby cart and swung it hard at Ricardo's arm, causing him to stumble and curse. "Go!" she yelled. "Mariana, run!" I bolted toward the loading dock doors, slamming my hand onto the control button Camilla had pointed out earlier. The mechanism groaned as the large metal door began to rise, inch by agonizing inch, revealing the cool night air outside. Behind me, Ricardo roared in anger, recovering faster than I expected. His footsteps thundered toward me. My heart slammed so hard, it blurred my vision. I ducked under the rising door just as his fingers grazed the back of my coat, shoving myself forward onto the concrete ramp that led to the side lot. The night hit me, cold, sharp, real. A slice of freedom so stunning I almost forgot to keep running. Behind me, Ricardo dropped to his knees and reached under the door as it continued to lift. "Mariana!" he screamed, the fury in his voice echoing against the metal walls. "You won't make it out of here. You hear me? You're nothing without me." I staggered to my feet, chest heaving, and looked back just long enough to see him crawling under the rising door, like a predator clawing at the last barrier between him and his prey. But this time, I was faster. I sprinted into the dark parking lot, my breath whipping through my throat like a blade, my legs burning as if they were carrying not just my body, but every piece of strength I had ever suppressed. I didn't stop until I reached the row of delivery vans near the fence line. I threw myself behind one, dropping into a crouch, chest heaving so violently I thought I might be sick. Inside my coat, the evidence pressed against me like a second heartbeat. My proof, my survival, my future. I peeked around the corner of the van, just in time to see Ricardo burst out of the loading dock, wild-eyed and frantic, scanning the lot for me. He looked less like a man and more like something feral, something unhinged by the loss of control. And for the first time all night, seeing him like that didn't make me afraid. It made me furious. It made me alive. It made me realize that running wasn't a weakness. It was the beginning of reclaiming everything he had tried to take from me. I stayed hidden in the shadows as he moved deeper into the parking lot, his footsteps echoing off the asphalt. I clutched the edge of the van, breathing through the burn in my lungs, and whispered to myself, "You are not his prey. Not anymore." And slowly, silently, I prepared to move again, not just to survive this night, but to end the hunt once and for all. I stayed crouched behind the delivery van, every muscle tight with fear and exhaustion, watching Ricardo search the parking lot like a man hunting a ghost that refused to obey him, his footsteps growing sharper and harder as his desperation mounted. And though part of me wanted to curl into myself and disappear, another part, the part of me that had survived years of small betrayals and quiet suffering, told me to stay focused, to remember that the evidence pressed against my heart wasn't just paper and data. It was the truth they never expected me to live long enough to hold. The night around us was still. The only movement, the rustling of a lone tree and the shifting shadows cast by the hospital's security lights. Then a sound cut through the silence, the distant wail of a police siren growing louder by the second. Ricardo's head snapped toward the noise, his body going rigid, and, for a heartbeat, I saw the flicker of fear cross his face, the realization that the situation was no longer entirely in his control. He turned quickly toward the loading dock door, as if calculating whether to run back inside and reconstruct the narrative he had prepared, or stay outside and continue hunting me. I tightened my grip on the van's bumper, my breath trembling in my throat, and waited for the moment his attention shifted enough for me to slip away. The sirens grew louder, echoing against the concrete walls of the hospital. I had no idea who called them. A nurse, a patient, someone responding to the alarm earlier, but fate had finally moved in my favor. Ricardo cursed under his breath and started toward the side of the building, scanning the shadows again, his teeth clenched with the rage of a man who had never been told no, never been outsmarted, never imagined the woman he underestimated would become the one person capable of destroying him. I pressed my back against the van, preparing to move, when a whisper came from behind me. So soft, I almost dismissed it as the wind. "Mariana." I spun, startled, and saw Camila crouched behind the next van, her face pale but determined. "We have to go. Now." I nodded, my eyes burning with gratitude and fear, and the two of us began to crawl low along the line of vehicles, moving like shadows fleeing the light. My chest heaved with the effort. My palms scraped against rough asphalt, but I didn't stop. Not even when Ricardo turned again and shouted into the night, "Mariana, come out! We can fix this! Don't make this worse!" His voice echoed with authority he no longer possessed, and a strange, bitter clarity washed over me. The man yelling for me was not the man I married. Maybe he never had been. We reached the far end of the lot, and Camilla pointed toward a narrow gate in the fence. "There," she whispered. "If we get through, we can reach the side street." "It's locked," I said, my voice breaking. "Not tonight," she replied, pulling a small master key from her pocket, the kind issued only to hospital supervisors. "Run as soon as it opens." The metallic click of the lock sounded too loud in the quiet night, and for one terrifying moment, I was certain Ricardo had heard it. But the sirens were too close now. 2 police cars pulling into the front of the hospital, lights flashing blue and red across the pavement like frantic strokes of paint. Camila threw the gate open, and we squeezed through, emerging onto a narrow side road lined with dumpsters and stray cats darting into the darkness. The moment my feet hit the street, something inside me finally broke. Not into fear, but into release. I wasn't trapped in the hospital anymore. I wasn't surrounded by death wearing a doctor's coat. I wasn't one step away from being erased. I was outside, alive, running. Camila pulled me forward, and we hurried toward the main avenue, the air hitting my face in sharp, biting waves. When we reached the corner, one of the police cars screeched to a stop in front of the emergency entrance, 2 officers jumping out and rushing inside. Camilla exhaled with shaky relief. "This is our chance," she whispered, "before he tries to twist everything." But before we could reach the officers, a 3rd car turned sharply into the side street, braking so hard the tires screeched. A tall officer stepped out, hand already on his weapon. "What's going on?" he demanded. My legs nearly collapsed beneath me as I clutched the folder inside my coat and forced my voice to carry through the night. "He tried to kill me," I said, the words tumbling out like stones. My husband. He staged everything. I have the evidence. Camilla stepped forward, her voice stronger than mine. Officer, she's telling the truth. There's a conspiracy inside the hospital. The surgeon, Villaseñor, he's been falsifying files. They were going to make her death look like a mistake. The officer stared at us, suspicion and concern flickering in his eyes. But when I pulled the folders from my coat, shaking, breathless, terrified, something shifted in his expression. He took them gently, scanning the first few pages, his eyebrows rising. Get in the car, he ordered. Both of you, now. We slid into the back seat as he radioed for backup, his voice sharp and clipped with urgency. The moment the doors locked, I felt the first real wave of safety wash over me. Fragile, trembling safety, but safety nonetheless. The car sped toward the front of the hospital, and through the window, I saw Ricardo step into the entrance lobby, his face twisting when he spotted the police presence. He scanned the area, searching for me, expecting that he could still control the narrative, still charm his way through the lies. But when his gaze caught the flashing lights of our patrol car, rounding the corner, something inside him cracked. A flash of panic, then fury, then the dawning comprehension that I had escaped him, that I had taken the truth with me, that I had lived long enough to become a threat instead of a victim. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The officer abruptly parked, jumped out, and approached the entrance, with 2 additional officers flanking him. One of them opened my door. Señora Herrera, stay here, he said gently. You're safe now. Safe. The word felt foreign in my mouth, like something I hadn't tasted in years. I watched through the windshield as the officers confronted Ricardo, their hands near their holsters, their voices firm. Ricardo lifted his hands, pretending confusion, denying everything, turning toward the officers with the same smooth charm he once used to calm me after an argument. But this time, I wasn't standing beside him, smoothing over his flaws, making excuses for his behavior. This time, the truth stood alone, and I watched the moment it reached him. The moment he realized everything he built, every lie, every plan, every cruelty, was crumbling because the woman he thought he owned had finally run, had finally fought, had finally survived. The officers placed him in handcuffs as he shouted my name, twisting around like a trapped animal trying to break free. Mariana, this is your fault. You ruined everything. Mariana. I closed my eyes, tears spilling down my cheeks, but not from sadness, from release, from rebirth, from the weight of a life I had carried alone, finally sliding off my shoulders. Camila squeezed my hand. You're safe, she whispered again, and this time I believed her. As Ricardo was shoved into the police car, screaming empty threats into the night, I exhaled for the first time in years. An exhale that tasted like freedom, like truth, like the beginning of a life I had forgotten I deserved. And in that long, trembling breath, I realized something else too. I hadn't just escaped him. I had escaped the woman he made me believe I was. I wasn't weak. I wasn't blind. I wasn't his possession. I was a survivor. And for the first time in my life, I was mine.